All right. Like you're streaming right now. We got a couple people joining in. Welcome everybody to a special edition of Rev War Revelry. This is HamiLive. So we're going to be focusing on talking about the musical that just recently released on Disney Plus streaming. So a lot of people who haven't had an opportunity to see this musical have heard a lot about it over the past a few years. Finally got a chance to see it. It's also been in the news. Some people thinking it doesn't focus on issues of race or slavery enough, so we can talk about some of that as we go along. But let me go ahead and introduce the group we got here today for this happy hour. We got Kate Egner Gruber from Jamestown Yorktown Foundation, curator there. Felicia Abrams, who also works there as the on-site education manager. And Liz Williams from Gadsby's Tavern here in Alexandria, Virginia. So and all our we're all fans of the play, so we could talk a little bit about it. What I want to do is basically just go around to everybody and kind of hear how you got introduced to Hamilton. Have you seen it on stage? Have you is this the first time you've seen it recently? All the words to the songs and all that kind of stuff. So I guess I'll start off. I'll kind of talk about my quick background with the musical. I actually heard about it back in 2016 when it first came out, like on a 60 Minutes show. It looked awesome. We went online. We were actually able to purchase tickets for the original cast in 2016. That summer. However, my wife Lauren, she was really into it. She already got the soundtrack, was listening to it. But then she couldn't travel. She was pregnant at the time, so we had to sell those tickets. But then we immediately bought it for this following summer. So in 2017, we went up and we were able to watch. It wasn't the original cast, but we watched it in the Rogers Theater there, and it was we thought it was great. And the great part too about being in New York City, we were able to go around to all the sites that they talk about in the actual play. So I'll kind of tell you about that later during the happy hour. But ultimately, it was great. And then it came out, a couple weeks ago. We watched it. So far, we've only seen it once, but I have a feeling we're going to be watching it a lot more over the coming weeks and months or whatever. But at first, I thought it was strange. I didn't really understand a musical about Hamilton, of course, of all founding fathers. You would expect something like Washington or something like that, I would think. But so I was a little iffy about it. But and I'm also not a big rap or hip hop fan, and also not a huge theater fan. But once my wife started, asking me, she wanted to go check out Kips Bay, and started telling me about Charles Lee at Monmouth, and I was like, okay, I need to. Obviously, this is getting to a lot of people who are not interested in history, and I think that has really shown that a lot of people from all sorts of different backgrounds from all across the country can relate to stuff in this musical. So ultimately, I think the musical is fantastic. I think it gets a lot of people interested in this era of history. And we here at Emerging Revolutionary War, that's what we're trying to do is, connect people to that time period. So, I think this play has done a lot of that, a lot of work for that already. But let's go ahead and I'll turn it over to Felicia. If you want to go ahead and tell us your background, when you first saw it and everything else like that.
So I, in my introduction to Hamilton was definitely with a 2016 exhibit that I'm sure Kate will touch on a little more. But talking a little about Hamilton, and I heard the music, and I had an intern who was playing it a lot at that point. So started listening to it. And then last year in December, when it came to Norfolk, we went to go. That was kind of our Christmas present to ourselves. So we wanted to go check it out and see what everyone was talking about, because we had quite a few friends who were big fans of this thing. And wanted to go check it out. And like you said, I'll admit, Hamilton wasn't the first guy I would have thought of for a musical. But I get it. I get the connection, the relevancy that people can see in his life and how you can pull different pieces of it. And I appreciate that the play didn't didn't show everything. It is a musical after all, with a lot of history in it, but it doesn't show everything. But it did share some dirty secrets of our founding fathers, which did the thing that I love the most, which is humanize the people of the past instead of putting them up on the pedestals. And so watched it then, working on some teacher professional development for it now. So still kind of pulling along this Hamilton track here, and how we can use pop culture in our classrooms. It's just another nice little bullet to put into that sort of presentation. But then watched it, when it came out here on Disney Plus, and I've seen it a couple of times in the past few weeks, and have tried to pull some other folks in who needed to watch it as well. So getting there. Toss it on to who wants to go next? Liz, Kate? Anybody?
I'll take it. My first introduction to Hamilton was actually through an intern as well. She was telling me about this musical she was about to go see at the Public Theater before it went to the Rogers. And being a Thomas Jefferson fan that I am, I totally originally poo-pooed it because it was about Hamilton. And, I'm not going to listen to a musical about his arch enemy, whatevs. But then once I listened to the music and made that connection to all of those different things that you talked about, of kind of opening this window to history in a different way that really engaged with people, I really enjoyed that aspect to it. So I got totally sucked into the music, and as did my family. So I was able to go see it in Chicago when I was there for a conference. And then when it came to the Kennedy Center a couple summers ago, the whole family went. So it was a really special evening with my two kids, who were besides themselves that they were seeing this in live, because we had been listening to the music for a long time. And then when it came to the Kennedy Center at Gadsby's Tavern Museum, we were able to incorporate all of those stories with some public programming that we did at the museum. So we created a specialty tour, Hamilton Frenemies, and because we have a lot of different connections to the Hamilton story, kind of the second act versus the first act of the musical. But that was really a popular program that we offered for folks to make that historic connection to what they were seeing on the stage. So yeah, and we've watched it twice so far since it's come out on Disney Plus. So Kate.
Yeah, so okay. I do have a confession to make, and today is actually the first time that I actually watched it on Disney Plus, and have not had a chance to see it live, which I don't know how that happened, but yeah, the question of like, when did you first hear about it? I am really struggling to remember a time before this musical was so ingrained in our popular culture, because it's everywhere now, especially in the field that we work in. I'm having a hard time remembering life before Hamilton, but it must have been, as Felicia pointed out, it must have been around 2015 or so. We at the American Revolution Museum at Yorktown started putting together our first special exhibition, which was about veterans of the American Revolution. So telling the lesser known histories of those veterans of the Revolution that you think you know, and following along their life story when they walked off the battlefields and into that new world created by the Revolution. And so we were thinking about different veterans we wanted to showcase for that exhibit. And someone said, I think it was probably our senior director, who said, I think there's this musical coming out about Hamilton. You should really think about doing Alexander Hamilton. I bet that's going to be big.
That's
so,
right.
Okay, I think I should, research that a little bit more. And so, digging down into it, we decided, we're going to feature Alexander Hamilton and the Marquis de Lafayette in this exhibit. And so that's how we really came to meet Hamilton and the musical. And I was just reading over our gallery content for that exhibit. And we were clever enough to pull some song lyrics into the text panels as well, which was a really fun way to connect with people in the gallery and focus on some themes that were in the play and some that weren't as well. But I really, really love it. Like Liz, I was really apprehensive about this because I would like to talk about this later, but I am a massive 1776 fan, and I was a little dubious that that was a little dubious that something would come out and just be this ridiculous kind of romp through the Revolutionary War. And I just didn't think it would be successful. I thought it would kind of undermine everything that we do as historians and as museums professionals trying to tell these stories. I originally didn't look at it as a way to to bring awareness and visibility to lesser known histories. I just thought this would be just one more thing that we would have to deal with. You know what I mean? And thankfully, it's been such an amazing tool in our toolkit now, as we do a lot of our programming and exhibitions. And Felicia, you mentioned that you like this humanizing aspect. Totally agree. Just every time I listen to the soundtrack, and now having seen it on Disney Plus, I love how the musical brings the energy back into the past. Because I think, I mean, this is the book. Look at that. This is the book that supposedly inspired that musical, and this is a doorstop. It's ridiculous.
Can you imagine I mean, he read it on vacation. Can you imagine reading it on vacation?
And by the way, who gets to take a vacation that is 690 pages long? That's what I want to know. But when you read this book, and I've read a big chunk of it, I love it, but it's really difficult, I think, for history to come off the page and become more than black and white, become more than just typed script. And I think that that's where this musical is so successful, in that you immediately get the emotion. You get the immediacy of it. You get the human passion, and they're jumping around and they're singing and they're being silly and rapping, having a rap battle.
So good.
But it's all so, the point of it is that these are humans expressing emotion and living real lives in a really uncertain time. So for that, I think it's successful, and I think we really owe a debt of gratitude to Lynn for writing this and giving us, again, just another great tool in our toolkit to do what we do.
Well, and I think also like you mentioned, humanizing these people. I think the choice to make the entire cast all African American and all Latino is a chance to also humanize people who often you just pass off as boring old dead white guys. Being able to tell their story. And John Hazel just commented that the show probably saved Alexander Hamilton from being removed from the $10 bill.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The Alexander Hamilton Appreciation Association did a huge campaign, Hamilton, to keep him on the dollar bill, and raised so much awareness of Hamilton's life and why. Why would you remove the Secretary of Treasury from an actual piece of currency? Why would you do that?
Well, I think it goes just to show you, how little people knew about him, and I think that this musical definitely has brought out and shown people, his contributions and kind of what he did. The interpretation is interesting because, as Liz was saying, how she's a fan of Jefferson. I think generally. The interpretation on Hamilton for much of history has been pretty negative. He's kind of viewed as this, I think Abigail Adams said, there's another Bonaparte in him, like this desire to be some sort of Napoleon or some sort of dictator in some sense, always kind of sneaking around behind Washington, this kind of thing. And you kind of see that also as recently as in the John Adams miniseries in 2008, Hamilton's kind of portrayed in this fairly negative light. So it's just interesting to try and how the interpretation in this play kind of goes to try and make him out to be the hero, which,
with flaws though. I mean, that's the thing I love about this musical and how they treat Hamilton and, many respects the other, founders in this piece is no one was perfect. And he was, the Reynolds pamphlet scene was just mind blowing to me, but it was a perfect example of he was not, he was human and he was not hero-ish because there's all this other side to him. So, and how artistically they presented that is really something that is special to see in this, because this is at its core a interpretation and an art piece of this book, and how Lynn was able to take these words off a page and create this musical that resonated with so many people is really a special skill.
Well, and we talk about it as an art piece, and I was listening to something with Dr. Joan Freeman the other day, and she was saying the thing that she's having to do with her students now is put the brakes on Hamilton. You know, he's not as great as the musical makes him seem, guys. So just hold up. Let's really dig down and start looking at these things. And I think it's a really interesting flip on the phenomenon of, you know, who is this guy? Okay, he's the guy on the $10 bill, and he died in a duel. Great. To oh, he's all of these things, but is he really all of these things? And where's that artistic license line to where the historical facts? So that was one of those comments that she made in an offhanded Drinking with Historians piece I was watching, where she's talking about how, you know, now's the really good time, and that's one thing that Lin-Manuel Miranda has said too, that this is that hook. This is that hook for pulling people in. So how, you know, once we get it there, we get students to engage at a deeper level. We get people to engage at a deeper level in this history, hopefully. It's one small step at a time, but getting to that deeper level allows us to have these conversations. Once everyone's on the same playing field here and they have a basic understanding of the facts or what they think are the facts, then we can do what we all do best and say, well, let's look at these sources. Let's look at these, you know, primary documents here and really think about what's being said in them.
We can do what we do best, and let's complicate everything.
Well, you know, we try our best to anyway.
I mean, I do
Remember that thing you thought you knew? Yeah.
Let's tell you about it now.
they did get, you know, Ron Chernow as an advisor, and I think they really did do a lot to try and get as much accuracy as they could in it. And, you know, yes, there are, and actually we could go around. You can tell me what your biggest complaint is from a historic standpoint as far as any errors or incorrect interpretations are. I'll tell you what my thing was that annoyed me was obvious. One of the most important campaigns, in my opinion, during the whole war was Trenton and Princeton, and Hamilton was there. He crossed the Delaware River. He was there in the battle and stuff. But they completely go right over it during the musical. So I would have preferred if they had included a crossing the Delaware reference or something in there. But you know, and we could talk too about, you know, the role of slavery and you know, if they don't focus on that as much as they should. But like Manuel Miranda's tweet, he said up to all this criticism, recent criticism was, you know, basically he, you know, time constraints and trying to tell this, you know, how do you
Absolutely.
everything to the doorstop of the book. And I do like that he tries to fit as much too with, you know, that's, you know, using rap to try and get as many words in as you can to tell this story.
My cocktail for reference. Just saying.
So yeah, there's, like I said, like I would have loved a crossing the Delaware reference, but you know, they can't fit that. You can't fit in everything everybody wants to see. So,
nope.
But so what do you think? Do you guys have any like certain? Yeah, what do you think, Kate?
I have two, and they're small. So I realize why Hercules Mulligan has to be a critical part of this. He's Hamilton's first friend in New York City. I get that. But then why make him out to be so? What gets me is that for everything that Hercules Mulligan does do for Washington and, you know, espionage during the Revolution, why not actually talk about Cato?
Agreed.
Who, you know, so who was, you know, so Hercules Mulligan is a Irish-born tailor working in New York City, making all of the you know, uniforms and everything for the British officers who were in New York, for all of the you know, upper class gentry loyalists. And so that's how he's able to get a lot of information and infiltrate a lot of people's or get a lot of information and then give it back to Washington and that network. But it's actually his slave Cato who is the one actually passing these messages back and forth. And so yeah, Hercules Mulligan is doing a lot of the talking, but it's Cato who's actually the that go-between. He's doing the real hard work of secreting these messages back and forth. Mm-hmm. So if you wanted to tell a more complete story of how African Americans, of how people who are enslaved really did impact the war in a really big way, tell the story of Cato. Just do it. You don't have Hercules Mulligan jump out during and say, hey, I'm the spy on the inside. It's like, no, you're actually taking measurements of a guy, and then it's actually Cato who's on the inside, using the fact that he's African American as kind of this plausible deniability, to have that movement between between the British and American lines. So that's thing the first. Do I remember thing the second? Thing the second. Why does everybody think that the siege of Yorktown is Marquis de Lafayette's brainchild? It's not. It's Rochambeau. And why? We can end this war at Yorktown. Yes, said Rochambeau. Those are my two. I yield the floor.
So good.
What do you guys think? You guys got any other?
Yeah, so Cato is definitely one of them. I did a little bit of time reading up on him today, but mine is Angelica Schuyler Church, who all the women in this play apparently are in love with Hamilton, and that's their only contribution to anything during this time period.
Can we come back to that after grievances round one? Can we come back?
We can just continue on grievances round one for here.
The airing of the grievances.
We'll get through all the different pieces here. But Angelica, she's married. She has kids. She's doing her own thing. She's friends with Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson. There are letters back and forth between influential people and her during this whole time period. She's over in England and ever in Europe for years without ever coming back. So this whole idea that all these women are just there to support him in a romantic role, they're so much more than that. Come on. Grievance round one.
I think that but for all these grievances, and I think we could continue on and nitpick all these little things we want to that are incorrect or kind of give the wrong impression. But I mean, to be honest, there's a lot of stuff I learned for the first time watching the musical. Things like his son dying of a duel, which is pretty amazing that I know.
In pistols.
Yes, same pistols. And those pistols, speaking of exhibits.
The same place. And the same place.
Yes. Everything's legal in New Jersey.
Just not everything is punishable by death in New Jersey.
That's right.
But
same difference.
But the fact that learning that me and Rob were talking not that long ago about the fact that Henry Lawrence or John Lawrence and Charles Lee had a duel. I mean, these kinds of things that are part of the historic record, but for whatever reason, you don't read a lot about them. So I thought that kind of stuff, and then you go back and you look and it's like, oh wow, that's pretty amazing. And the fact that they're able to include those things and don't give such a warped view of some of these things, I think is helpful in the long run. So.
Well, last Sunday, just thinking about nitpicking and the grievances of things that are like the creative license of the musical. Last Sunday night, on Twitter, there's a whole group of tweeters that tweet every Sunday night about movies. Mm-hmm. So it's historians at the movies. So hashtag HATM. And Hamilton was last Sunday's movie. And Joanne tweeted all night long throughout the musical about things that they got not quite right, or things that she wanted to correct, or just historical tidbits along the way, which I found really helpful because it helped frame some of the things that were in the musical. They're really great lines, but then she tweeted back, well, that's not necessarily the case. Here's the true story. So that was really helpful to me. And there was this huge, following on Twitter Sunday night just to see all of that that content and that information. So the historical narrative alongside the musical for me is really helpful, and that's our jobs as public historians to say, okay, I know you really love the Angelica Hamilton like love fest that might be happening, but here's the real fact to it, and then it broadens the perspective. So it's always fun, and I torture my kids all the time when we see things like this on TV, and I'm like, well, let's go see if that actually happened, and then we hunt down information.
What's your favorite tidbit that you learned from the tweet storm last week?
The Tomcat story was her tweet on that was really funny. Nope.
Yeah. Well, but the funny thing about that is that the way that he does the aside within the musical, and he says, like he breaks the fourth wall, and he's like, "That's true.
That's true."
Yeah.
No, it's not. Why did you do that?
The one time
So
Yeah.
You're walking into it. You're just walking it.
come on, man. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I was following that too, Liz. And my favorite one, going back to Angelica, was where she's like, let's talk about the comma. And the comma was actually a letter from Angelica to Hamilton, and Hamilton asked her about it, and Angelica shuts that down real fast.
Mm-hmm.
So I love the little back and forth that Joanne and a few other people mentioned about the comma.
The comma. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, who's everybody's favorite character in the play? And I'll go ahead and tell you. I'll do this just so Rob is happy. Rob, who watched the show first time, if Joe hasn't seen it, so I'm calling them both out that they need to get on board here. But Rob said he liked King George III character the best, which he is probably, I would say, the funniest part of the show. And I think we were just talking beforehand that, during the whole 2 hours and 40 minutes, he's only on screen, 9 minutes, something like that.
9 minutes. Yep.
Very small role, but obviously had like a very big impact on people's viewing of it. But I thought it was interesting too how they just kind of turn him into this caricature of just straight up evilness. So it just kind of makes it just very black and white during the whole. Which is interesting because it's obviously much more complicated than that, but it's still entertaining. So, does anybody else have a favorite character?
I think mine is also probably, well, I really like the comic relief of King George, and I like his portrayal, even though I disagree with the accuracy of, I mean, the guy was like, I mean, when he finds out about, Cornwallis surrendering at Yorktown, he's like, so keep going. I mean, we haven't lost anything yet, So anyway, but Eliza is just, for the first act, I was really frustrated at Eliza's portrayal. And then just the last 3 minutes of the whole thing, everything clicks, and I'm like, oh, actually, I think this has all been about you this whole time. So it's Eliza Schuyler, hands down.
Yep.
Yeah, I would have to agree, but she's the one who tells the story.
Yeah.
She's the one who's responsible for, preserving all of the papers and all the, she had 50 years after he died to do all of these amazing things with her life, in trying to, one, preserve his legacy, but two, keep moving forward. So yeah, no, I love Eliza. As an aside, not a character, but we were talking about it earlier. Daveed Diggs, absolutely amazing. Love him as Lafayette and Jefferson. And it's interesting how different he plays both of those people. That they're it's very clear that they're their own individual characters in this.
I agree. Well, as a singer, I can't not just be and a George. I work at so many George Washington sites over the course of my lifetime. Christopher Jackson just singing as George Washington every time he steps on the stage is, I just turn into this big pile of mush when I hear him, and his, when he's his last song where, Washington's going home, or,
Mm-hmm.
I cry pretty much every time I see that, just because I feel it when he's singing it, and how exhausted Washington was at that point, and he's like, I'm out. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going home. And the way he sings it is just really strikes me. The other character I love, and you'll have to watch it a second time because sometimes you don't necessarily see it the first time, is the Bullet. The ensemble dancer, the Bullet.
Yes, yeah.
You watch her, and each time I've watched it, I see her at different aspects of scenes as the harbinger of death,
Mm-hmm.
and how they were able to create this this character in the musical to move the story along a little bit, or just sprinkle in some really choreographed magic is really special to see on screen.
You mentioned George Washington. I liked him as well. I really liked the portrayal of him. And this is another good question. Favorite songs, and I was gonna say when I was originally thinking about talking about this, best song, yeah, to me is "Teach Them How to Say Goodbye," because ultimately, in my opinion, I think that's Washington's greatest contribution is giving up power, and they really kind of nail that in the musical as far as showing the importance of that. And then you see people like Hamilton and everybody else saying, we need you to keep staying, and him saying, no, I need to go home. So I thought that's probably one of my favorite songs.
The Washington Farewell is definitely my favorite, and my favorite way that they use primary sources, because the whole speech at the end, that if you run down Washington's farewell to the very bottom of it, to the last like 2 paragraphs, it's just pulled straight out of the document, which really goes back to that testament to try and keep some of these historical aspects as true to the sources as possible.
Yeah, I think they could have done, you mentioned, we could have a lot more work to do based on how off script they wanted to go. So it's kind of nice that they did try keep some of this stuff accurate throughout. One of the things I think is also really cool is when he was writing this, I think place was really important to him, because I think he does go to, and at the end of the credits, they thank some of the places where he included. I saw Morris Jumel Mansion up in New York, at Hamilton Grange, which is a National Park Service site, Tudor Place here in Washington, D.C., which had connections with Eliza. So I just think that's kind of cool that I think they recognize the importance of place, and you kind of see that throughout the play as well. So.
Yes.
They mention a lot of places. She's buried here in Trinity Churchyard. Pointing out places. Here in New York, I think is really kind of cool that they try to tie it to historic places throughout the play as well. So
absolutely, Manhattan is its own character in the whole play, and I love that. Yeah, the fact that they're performing these scenes really not too far away from where so many of these conversations played out, whether it's Francis Tavern or Trinity Church. It's and when Mark, you said when you went to go see it, in New York, you were able to kind of take a little tour of all the places that are in the musical.
Yeah, that's the best.
That's amazing.
And I think one of the like the I can't remember what article I was reading, but like the Grange when Hamilton hit the stage, they had like 100+% increase in visitation because of this musical. And all the articles now of like your Hamilton experience of all the National Park Service sites that you can go visit New York, and it's just really expanded this tourist opportunity for people to learn more and visit these places. And I think that's one of the best things that's come out of this is this increased awareness and desire to see these places. And one of my friends actually texted me after watching the musical. He's like, I gotta go to New York to go visit all of these things. It's like, go once the pandemic's over. You go
Yeah.
visit all those places.
I mean, so Felicia and I are at Jamestown Yorktown Foundation, and it is so my favorite song is obviously Yorktown, World Turns Upside Down. And I listen to it in full, at full blast in my car while I'm driving down Colonial Parkway on my way to Yorktown, because why would you not do that?
Yeah, of
I
course.
agree.
I mean, how lucky are we that you hear, like, there is now, not just in a musical, but just in our collective zeitgeist. Like, if you're alive, you know this musical, and that's, I think, one of the most popular songs from it. You hear two notes, and then your brain goes, the Battle of Yorktown, 1781. How lucky are we that we get that we get to work with that? I mean,
That is amazing.
How often are we going to have like a major pop culture phenomenon help us do what we do?
If he had just added like 2 more lines for the election of 1800, it would have been really great for my site. I have to like text him or like, tweet Lynn. If you just needed 2 more lines to say, once Jefferson became president, he partied at Gatsby's Terror Museum. I just needed that, and then we're good. Maybe that's like, round 2, Hamilton. We'll see.
Well, and back when all
revival.
This came out, there you go.
That's right.
Back when all this came out in 2015, we had a school group in 2016, and I remember one of my educators calling me after the tour because this group of high school girls, all they wanted to know about was Hamilton at Yorktown, and the educator had no idea why they were so interested in this, because they hadn't heard of the musical yet. It was still
so
early.
fantastic.
It was still the beginning stages of this really starting to catch on, and they had no idea why all these girls cared about was where was Hamilton. That was it.
He was in our museum. You should come check it out.
Fantastic.
He was. We took him to the panels that were there, and we took him to the Siege film, and that was great. That's all they needed.
Yeah, but yeah, the sense of place, I guess, is wrapped up in that too, and that we really do get to sort of see this really cool artistic rendering of the Siege of Yorktown through the storming of the 2 readouts, and that kind of helps play in your mind's eye when you go to those actual sites, I think, even though they're devoid of real content, but it still helps you, like I said earlier, kind of get into that mindset of there was energy at this place, something real happened here. And if you can't, like, I'm not great at going to battlefields and envisioning action and people, and I read about it and I write about it and I talk about it, but it doesn't really make it that way up here for me. And so I think that's another really great benefit of Hamilton, is that you can go to like the actual battlefield, the 2 readouts, and you can almost kind of play that scene out in your head, and at least just be reminded that there was that raw energy in this place. Something real happened here, and I think that can be a difficult barrier to break down sometimes. So that's, again, just another reason why we're happy, or why I'm happy to have this musical so highly popularized. And I'm sure, like Liz too, where you work, even though we didn't quite get to
So close.
to Gatsby, but you still have so much of that energy at your site, and can play off of Time to Take a Shot, which I know you guys have.
Oh, our whole specialty tour has the lyrics throughout the tour, and the fact that all of these main characters that you see on the stage all were in our space in one way or another, minus Hamilton. But we had Lafayette, we had Madison, we had Jefferson, we had G-Dubs. So it's again that connection, and we can in a way tell that story like they've seen on the stage, because they've been humanized. They're drinking, they're slapping each other's back about finding a lady. We tell that story in some respects in our tavern space, because George Washington had his birthday party in our ballroom. So it's those human connections that we can easily make, that builds those synapses in the brain, and gets people interested in learning more and diving deeper into these things, which is why I love the musical so much, because it makes people think a little bit more, wants, really inspires people to learn more and to go visit Yorktown and to, dive into our collection and ask questions and see things for themselves.
Be in the room where it happened.
That's right. That's how I call the ballroom. It is the room where it happens, like all the time.
Here's our when we toured around New York City. There's a great little pamphlet too. I think you can get that has driving toward many different locations like Francis's Tavern. They also had the actual from the song "The Room Where It Happened." Although the building is no longer there, those Jefferson's residence. There's a plaque on there noting that the location. But I would say one of the coolest locations that we went to, of course, was Weehawken and the site of which actually today is the anniversary of when Alexander Hamilton actually died.
Should we take a shot?
Don't throw away your shots. Raise a glass to freedom. How many references can we get here?
Something you never take away.
I love double entendres throughout all the different lyrics, things like that. Not throwing away your shot. Of course, at the beginning he's talking about not throwing away his shot to do something with his life, and then of course later that morphs into not throwing away his actual pistol shot. All these kinds of little things like that throughout. If you study all the lyrics really closely, it's kind of interesting how many double entendres all these sayings have. But you go to Weehawken today, you have this awesome view of modern New York City, and they have a flagpole and a bust of Hamilton there, and the stone that they say he laid his head on after he was shot. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's still kind of cool to be there at the But I think there's a lot of myth and everything that's kind of been infused into that whole story. But it's kind of neat to see the play kind of delve into some of that as well. So. Yes. And we also got a comment here from John Resto about how the actual site is actually lower down on the flats or whatever there. But the monument's up on the top of the hill there. So we also had a question. We mentioned a little bit. So what do you all think about the? Do you think that we mentioned nitpickings and things like that? Do we think that there should have been these recent claims that slavery was avoided throughout? Do you think that it was just a matter of space and time to be able to fit that in, or do you think those criticisms are warranted, or do you think that's fodder for another play at some point in the future, as Kate was talking about Cato? Should there be another musical made to tell some of these obviously hundreds of more stories? So I don't know.
All right. I think yes. I think that there's so much language, there's so much talk. I mean, especially about John Lawrence and all of the comments about, we'll never be free unless we end slavery. I just feel like some of these there's a lot of that language about King George enslaving a population, not setting people free. There's a lot of this language that kind of flows through the first act, and I just feel like then it's all thrown away. We see John Lawrence as a major character in the first act, and again, all of these references to him wanting to raise a whole regiment of African Americans, but we never really we don't come back to the fact that he really tries to do it, no one lets him do it. I mean, that just falls flat in South Carolina. Nobody wants that to happen. And so I think that they could have done a better job of, if you're going to introduce that, don't throw it away, at least come back to it and maybe introduce that little complication into the narrative a little bit. But I think I love Hamilton, but at the end of the day, for all the good it does, it is still another white founding father story. And I'm not saying that there's not value in Hamilton. Obviously, we've just been talking about how much value there is in using it as a teaching tool, or getting people more excited, that kind of open door into more complicated issues, which is ones that these are conversations we're happy to have when people visit our sites. But I do think, I mean, again, Cato was there too. I mean, there are a lot of other people in the rooms where things happen, and to kind of keep it so isolated on these central stories, you're already taking a lot of liberties with anyway. I think that at the end of the day does do a disservice to more narratives that we still don't recognize as important. We don't recognize Hamilton as much as people think that we should. Obviously, Cherno did a great job of trying to redirect conversations about that. Obviously, Lin-Manuel helped with that. But at the end of the day, it is another founding father treatment where there's so much more room for so many other stories to better complete our understanding of the era.
Well, and I think that, to continue on to that, Hamilton isn't an abolitionist. And it mentions that in one of the songs at the very beginning. He's the abolitionist, manumissionist. He does found the Manumission Society in New York, but he writes 27 volumes of things, and in no sustained way does he talk about anti-slavery. And in fact, the Schuyler's are slaveholders, and he's the lawyer, so he's the one who's helping with the purchase of people, and that's followed. You can track that in the sources. So I think that when this is being published and how we're looking at it, people were looking to the founding fathers for someone who was on the right side, what we perceive now as the right side of that history. And since we don't know as much, or didn't know as much about Hamilton, there's a whole new renewed interest in him now. He was a handy person to kind of pin some of these things on. And it helped because you could find, one or two references here or there. He supported Lawrence in his attempt to raise a regiment, but he's not writing pamphlets against slavery with him. So it just complicates it. Like we said, it's what we do in public history. Here, let me show you what you have, and let me complicate it a little bit for you. So that's definitely what we're doing here, is complicating this. Hamilton was a man of his time. He bought into this, and Kate, to get you around to 1776, this is that same debate that they're having there with the Declaration. Mm-hmm. So it's not going away, and it's hard to portray. So I don't know, it's a balancing act of what do you do, and what do you allow the historians to come in and talk about and say, hey, this is great, but let's talk about what was missed here.
And I think part of this was, I know there were songs and language that Lynn cut because it was so long, and maybe that was something that ended up on the chopping block. But I must say, nothing can come close to, we can have a whole conversation about this, is Molasses to Rum to Slaves out of 1776, as a powerful song to convey this. So maybe we could do some creative editing of Hamilton, and then we'll slice in some 1776 things, and then we'll have a longer but maybe more complete look at things. But I mean, it's, again, I come back to, it's an artistic representation of a story. Mm-hmm. And we as public historians have to fill in those blanks for people. And if he had included all of these things, we probably would still be watching the first version of Hamilton now. We wouldn't be talking with each other. So but it allows space for us to fill in those blanks in a way. So thanks, Lynn, for not filling all the stuff. For including everything. Yeah. Now they have to come and talk to us, and we can give them the broader picture.
Well, and there was a third cabinet battle piece that was all about slavery.
Right.
So that was one of those pieces that was on the chopping block there when you had to decide what was cut and what was kept.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, and I think the musical sums it up too very good at the end. Who lives, who dies, who tells your story. So I think that's something we're all very much engaged with. Is just telling people stories. So ultimately, like we all said, I think the musical really entertaining. I think it's great. I think it's getting a lot of people interested in the era and hopefully want to come out and see some of the different sites. But any final thoughts on the musical or anything else like that?
I'd love to see if there's an increase in college students majoring in history because of this phenomenon in their formative years. So that'll be a thesis for somebody in the
See,
years from now.
Yeah.
You mentioned some of these sightseeing large increases of visitors directly responsible for it. But yeah, how many people are going to want to study it more because of that? That'd be great.
My kind of parting shot there is that it shows that this whole revolution was messy.
Yep.
They weren't destined to win. They weren't destined to write the Constitution. It was messy. It was hard. It's not as clean cut as people like to see it. And that's a great piece to, again, get people talking about.
That's a great point, Felicia, because the very first moments of the musical, I mean, if you don't already know that Burr shot Hamilton, in the first 5 minutes at the end of the first song, he's going to get shot at some point.
Yeah.
So that giveaway at the very beginning kind of solves a lot of mysteries, or at least shows you where this is going to go. And to your point, Felicia, the American Revolution was not a predetermined win for the Patriots. And so remembering exactly right that they didn't have that 5-minute musical number in 1775 to be like, oh wait, there's no song about the Treaty of Paris that they have to look forward to, like, resolving at the end of all this. So yeah, you're right, just exposing those complications and back to your original point about just the humanity of it all is, again, a gift to us to unpack for people, which is great.
Especially as we move into the anniversary and we get to the 250th. This is foundational things to build upon as we reach that point.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be, well, it'll be interesting to see, how this impacts, our understanding and view of the 250th anniversary. So. All right, well, we're going to go ahead and sign off for tonight, but thank you to Felicia, Kate, and Liz. Liz, I think your video got frozen a little bit, but we'll sure you say goodbye there as well. But thank you all for joining us tonight. We'll be back again next weekend, next Sunday night. So on behalf of Emerging Revolutionary War, thank you all for tuning in.